What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everyone's doing well out there today. We're talking about the quarterbacks. We're going to start and sit here for Week 15. Fantasy football, probably the beginning of the fantasy playoffs for a lot of you out there. And when it comes to the quarterback position, we know we have a ton of options when it comes to fantasy football. So when we go into a week like this, we try to limit anyone with any risk because there's so many good options out there. With that being said, there's probably going to be a couple guys that I like, but they have that injury concern. They're coming into the game injured, and I really don't know if I want to tempt fate and have them be one shot away from being knocked out beginning of the game and totally ruining my fantasy chances. Now, before we get into every matchup and every player here, a quick reminder, if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks yet, you need to. Start up a new account, use referral code Headliners, make an initial $10 deposit. We'll match your deposit all the way up to $100, and they're doing something right now called the 12 Days of Picks. Here, I'll even show it on my phone. Can you see it there? The 12 Days of Pixmas, and every single day for the next 12 days, they have some type of new promo, some type of, added entry or bonus for you that you definitely got to get in on it. Don't miss out on this. Use referral code Headliners at sign up there and come win some money with us on Prize Picks. I had myself a good weekend last week. I'm talking, I think I made like $1,300 last weekend just on Prize Picks alone. Looking forward to doing it again here this week. But now let's dive into all the content. Kicking it off, Thursday Night Football, San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks. And full disclosure, right here off the top, I really liked Brock Purdy. I wanted to throw him into the start column here this week. How can anyone not be rooting for this kid at this point? 5 touchdowns in his last 2 weeks and has beaten the Miami Dolphins and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, averaging over 200 yards passing and 2 touchdowns a game. Now, both of those were home games, so this is going to be a little bit tougher on the road in Seattle. But we need the touchdowns to continue. The volume in this offense really isn't ever that high. The reason that these guys rack up points, whether it was Jimmy G or Brock Purdy, they have so many playmakers on this offense that once you get the ball in their hands, they can make big plays happen, and that benefits the quarterback position. They can make it happen after the catch. Right now, Seattle, they're allowing right around 17 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, which is right around the league average, but they've really benefited here as of late from facing the likes of the Carolina Panthers and Los Angeles Rams over the last 2 weeks. We know Deebo Samuel is out. CMC is on the injury report and limited right now, should play. But Purdy himself is also limited and questionable with an oblique injury. Doesn't sound like he's going to miss the game, but you better believe it. Early in that game, they're going to try to get to him, put some pressure on him, and you never know. One easy sack, one little hit could really ruin the day for Brock Purdy and your fantasy team. I want to emphasize that maybe you want to gamble. If you're a gambler, then Brock Purdy may be your guy on Thursday Night Football, but it still is Thursday Night Football, and you never know what's going to happen in those ball games. He still has plenty of weapons at his disposal to have a good game. His ability to be mobile and throw on the run are great for Brock. I like this kid a lot. I just don't know if I want to take that risk when it comes to fantasy football, so I have him as a sit, even though I really want to start him. His opponent, Geno Smith, this guy is a crazy story. At some point, we need to start discussing this guy's name for like multiple awards this year. He's thrown for double-digit touchdowns in 11 of 13 ball games, hasn't thrown for less than 250 yards in a game since week 5. But there is one issue here for the Seattle Seahawks. One of those 2 games in which Geno did not throw for double-digit touchdowns, it was against this team, the San Francisco 49ers, which was arguably his worst game of the season. 197 yards passing, no touchdowns, and an interception. San Francisco allows the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at only 13.7 per game. However, over the last month of the season, they have allowed over 240 yards passing 3 times. So there may be like a bend but not break style defense there. When it comes to pass defense, they're fairly healthy overall. In Seattle, they should have Kenneth Walker back, which is somewhat surprising to me. Do I want to think that this is 100% Kenneth Walker? I really don't believe so. And you have to think that if San Francisco is to get a lead in this ballgame, we don't see a whole lot of Kenneth Walker because they don't want to risk re-injury in a game that may get out of hand early. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm just saying that is a possibility. I don't want Seahawks fans out there getting all pissed off this early in a video. But how do you not start the quarterback 6 overall on the year, a guy that has 26 touchdowns this season? Another one of those scenarios that just may not be a safe start. But how do you sit Geno Smith? The guy's done nothing but produce all year long. Now, I would like to say let's head over to Sunday football. We're not going to head to Sunday. We're going to head to Saturday because we have Saturday football here this weekend, starting off with the Indianapolis Colts, Minnesota Vikings, and Matt Ryan. Coming off the bye week, still really hard to trust Matt Ryan. He is also coming off his first game with multiple touchdown passes since week 6. So, hey, way to go, Matty Ice. It's the first time it looks like you knew what you were doing on the football field in quite some time because he hasn't thrown for over 200 yards in a game since week 6 either. And that's partly because there's less passing volume in this offense than what we saw to start the season. Under Frank Reich, they were throwing the ball over 40 times a game. Right now, he's averaging just under 35 times a game under head coach Jeff Saturday, and that's really because they're running the ball more with Jonathan Taylor now going up against Minnesota. They allow just over 20 fantasy points per game, 6th most in the NFL, and have allowed over 300 yards passing now in 5 straight ball games. So a good matchup, no other major injuries of concern, but you can see my X factor is a big old fat 0 because this is one of those opportunities that I don't really want to take a chance on in week 15 in the fantasy playoffs in an offense that we've seen struggle more times than not. He's just not consistent, is Matt Ryan. He has the ability to go out there and score 20 plus points, sure, but he's only done that 2 times all year long, and I'm not taking a risk on an inconsistent offense like that in week 15, so he's going to be a sit. His opponent, Kirk Cousins, quarterback 11 overall on the season, coming off a huge game, right? 425 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions against the Detroit Lions, and a lot of that was thanks in part to Justin Jefferson and his ability to go over 200 yards by himself, but good to see the bounce back for Kirk Cousins after a couple tough matchups here as of late against the Jets, the Patriots, the Cowboys, but what's good to see is them involving Adam Thielen. I mentioned in this video weeks ago that we really need another piece of this offense to step up if Minnesota's really going to compete late into the season. As of late, that has been Adam Thielen. I guess they listened to me. Way to go, Minnesota Vikings, but they're doing that now and it's starting to help open up the passing game a little bit. What we really need is the offensive line to get healthy so that we can start utilizing Dalvin Cook a little bit better in that backfield. The Colts, they allow right on 16.3 fantasy points per contest, 20th in the league, and haven't allowed over 200 yards passing since week 10. They're playing pretty well in Indianapolis, but the Vikes did get some pretty good news here today. It could be the return of offensive lineman Christian Darrisaw and Garrett Bradbury, and if that happens, that is a huge boost to this offensive line. If Cousins has the time, he will pick you apart, and improving the play on the offensive line is exactly the way to go about that. The offensive line is really what's been hurting this team for the last few weeks. Kirk Cousins has been sacked 33 times in 2022, with 4 games left to play. They didn't allow more than 30 in 2 of the last 3 years, so I'm hoping for a big finish from Kirk Cousins if they can get back to full health. He is a start. Next game, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns. We have maybe Tyler Huntley, if he's even healthy enough to play. It doesn't sound like it's going to be Lamar Jackson. We're not even going to contemplate Tyler Huntley, really. So we're really not going to contemplate a 3rd string quarterback here in week 15, right? I mean, we're looking at a low volume offense in a low producing offense, even with all the starters healthy. Cleveland allows 15.7 fantasy points per game, 10th fewest in the league. More of another one of those defenses that are easier to run on than throw on. Just not an option for me here this week with no bye weeks and everybody else out there. His opponent, Deshaun Watson, he's close, right? You see him as a sit still, but he's getting better. He looked a lot better in his second game than he did in his first game, right? Not great, but definitely better for sure, even though I hate how the offense changes in Cleveland with Deshaun Watson under center because it's killing our Nick Chubb shares. He was able to find the end zone last week for the first time, which is definitely an improvement. He took a huge jump in passing volume as well. 22 attempts in his first game, 42 attempts in his second game, and mostly that's due in part to them having to throw a lot because they're playing from behind. Now they get a matchup going up against the Baltimore Ravens, though, who allow 17.4 fantasy points per game, which is 11th most, but they've really benefited as of late from facing the likes of Carolina and Denver and Mitchie Biscuits in Pittsburgh. Amari Cooper is currently questionable. David Njoku, who's like perma-questionable at this point, should play, but so are 4 members of their defense that are all questionable this week. They just sent JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, to the injured reserve, not going to be out there for the defense. I'm just not ready yet for this. Not against Baltimore. Baltimore's defense has been playing great here as of late, and with the potential of Baltimore having their 3rd string quarterback in this ballgame, I could see Cleveland getting a lead and then finally relying on their running game a little bit more. I'm going to give it one more week, and I'm going to circle week 16 as the potential start of Deshaun Watson in fantasy football if everything goes well this weekend. How about we cap off Saturday with the Miami Dolphins Buffalo Bills? Started off with Tua Tagovailoa, who for the first time, and I can't tell you how long, is listed as a sit. And I'm worried about Tua here this week, coming off his worst game, one of his worst games of the year, losing back-to-back games now and failing to score over 17 points in either one of those games. And now he gets to go to Buffalo. The passing volume has decreased now in Miami over 3 straight weeks, but a lot of that is due in part to injuries, not just to the offensive line, but to the pass catchers as well. Buffalo only allows 14.1 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's 6th fewest in the league. Jalen Waddle has been banged up. Tyreek Hill has been banged up. Offensive lineman Terron Armstead has been banged up. Austin Jackson is out. Jeff Wilson Jr. is hurt. And don't even get me started on the team's best player, River Craycraft, who is also not going to probably play either. This is a lot. And then when you add on top of that, that Tua himself is also dealing with a low ankle injury, I don't know if I want to risk it this much. Now, as of right now, there is a 90% chance of rain/snow and below freezing temperatures in Buffalo. Not an ideal start for Tua, and that's why I have him listed as a sit. His opponent, Josh Allen, we know that we're going to start Josh Allen almost regardless of game conditions, right? I don't have those same doubts with Josh Allen. He's used to playing in these conditions, multiple touchdowns now in 3 straight games after a little bit of a down spell there middle of the season, but we've seen him dominate this team before. They played against Miami back in week 3, and in that ball game, Josh Allen threw for 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and had 47 yards rushing alone in that game. Miami, they still allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at over 20 per game. Their offense fairly healthy in Buffalo. We know we got to start them, but I'm going to bump down the X factor here just a little bit due to the weather concerns. All right, now is the time where we can throw it over to Sunday football. Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints, a matchup of now Desmond Ridder, new quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, going against Andy Dalton in New Orleans. But I'll start off with Desmond Ridder. And let me start off by saying this. I really like Desmond Ridder. I like the play. I like the potential of Desmond Ridder. I really wish we had Kyle Pitts in this lineup now that Ridder is under center, because this is a good thing for the passing game of the Atlanta Falcons. He's going to stretch the field a little bit more, go deep down the field more consistently, and that could really finally help Drake London here just a little bit, but not somebody I want to rush into my lineup here for fantasy football. I want to see how this offense looks first with him under center, going against the Saints, even though they allow 17 fantasy points per game, 14th in the league. I mean, they're coming off the bye week, which is great because they've given Desmond Ridder time to know that he's going to be the starter. This isn't a last minute thing. He's known for over a week now. I just want to see what he looks like on the field. But if he plays anything near his capabilities, Desmond Ridder is going to be very interesting come 2023 when we actually start looking at him as a fantasy option, but probably not this year. And then his opponent here, Andy Dalton, in probably what is one of the easiest matchups he's had in quite some time. That does not mean that I want to start him, though. The floor is so low, even though the ceiling is pretty high. There's no consistent baseline here, really, for Andy Dalton. Just listen to these point totals that he's had in games here as of late. 21, 12, 8, 28, 10, 15. It is all over the place. Now he's going against Atlanta. Not a bad matchup. They allow over 18 fantasy points per game, 9th most in the league. Juwan Johnson questionable. Mark Ingram is out. Most of the other injuries on the defensive side of the football. I just don't know if I want to risk that floor of 8 and the ceiling of 28 this week for Andy Dalton. You never know which offense is going to show up. It's an offense that's still not overly utilizing Alvin Kamara. I have my worries about the New Orleans offense, and that's why I'm not considering Andy Dalton here today. How about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Carolina Panthers? Another 2 quarterbacks I am not considering. Why is that? We don't even know for sure whether or not for the Pittsburgh Steelers that Kenny Pickett is going to play, and we're not going to start Mitchell Trubisky in the fantasy playoffs. No way we do that. There's not enough volume in this passing offense. There's not enough scoring in this passing offense, even though Carolina allows over 16 fantasy points per game with Pickett in concussion protocol and even Pat Freiermuth questionable to play. No way I'm starting Kenny Pickett here this week. Same can be said for Sam Darnold, though, too. I mean, we're not considering Sam Darnold. Are we really considering him? I hope you're not considering him. I would almost rather not start a quarterback than start Sam Darnold, because by starting Sam Darnold, you would tell your league mates that, hey, I really don't know what's going on. At least if you just left it blank and say, listen, I'd rather have a 0 than Sam Darnold. At least people are like, all right, he has somewhat of an idea of what's going on with Sam Darnold. Sorry for that little rant, but I get to see it firsthand here in Carolina, and it's right. I mean, even DJ Moore questionable to play as of right now, going up against Pittsburgh. They allow over 18 fantasy points per game, which is 10th most, but we're not starting Sam Darnold. Which will then take us to the Philadelphia Eagles and Chicago Bears, which is going to be my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Don't forget, the holiday seasons are upon us. We definitely need to head over to manscaped.com right now. Find yourself something for Christmas, fellas. Help find something for your significant others, ladies, whatever it may be. Time is running out. Christmas is right around the corner. So use promo code HEADLINERS at checkout to receive 20% off your order and free shipping at manscaped.com right now. And this should be a fun matchup between Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. We'll start it off with Jalen Hurts, the overall quarterback 1 in fantasy football right now. Hasn't had a game with less than 2 touchdowns since week 4. The Philadelphia offense is humming. They have scored over 35 points now in 3 straight ball games, and he himself has not scored less than 20 fantasy points in a game since week 6. Only 3 interceptions on the year. The rushing has been there as of late, has had at least 75 yards rushing in 3 of the last 4 ball games. Going up against Chicago, they allow over 17 fantasy points per game. Potentially have a Dallas Goedert, because right now I'm feeling fancy. He could return this week. It's going to be cold, it's going to be windy, but we never sit Jalen Hurts and the amount of weapons he has in this offense. And then his opponent, Justin Fields, coming off of his bye week, been dealing with a little bit of an illness, but he should be good to go this weekend in a game in which we need the rushing upside. It's not going to be easy to throw on the Philadelphia Eagles. At least he's had 60-plus yards rushing now in 7 straight games and rushing touchdowns in 6 straight. Doesn't have a lot of great options to throw to, though. Don't forget, Darnell Mooney is out for the year. Chase Claypool can't seem to pick up the playbook. And Cole Kmet is about the only thing that Philadelphia needs to really focus on, and that's a problem because it really makes them one-dimensional. Philly, they allow the second fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at 13.1 per game. Like I mentioned, Mooney is out for the year. We're still another week away or so from Khalil Herbert returning. The illness with Justin Fields, how much does that limit him throughout the week in practice? This kid has surprised people in tough matchups, though, all year long. The rushing upside alone makes him elite. I just hope he can get a little bit of help in the passing game, because if he can throw for $150, maybe a touchdown, could be another huge day for Justin Fields. Now that'll take us down to Kansas City and the Houston Texans. Patrick Mahomes, quarterback 2 on the year, and we kind of know what to expect here, right? 300 yards passing or multiple touchdowns have happened in all but 1 game this entire year, and that was in week 3. Going up against the Houston Texans, they allow the fewest points in fantasy football to opposing quarterbacks, but they have allowed over 270 yards passing now in 2 of the last 3 games they've played. Kadarius Toney is questionable, but there's a chance that we get back Mecole Hardman. I'm not sitting here and talking you into starting Patrick Mahomes when he's playing indoors against an inferior team. We know we start him. For the Texans quarterback, no. If you heard my rant on Sam Darnold, the hell do you think I'm going to say for the Texans quarterback? Just no. We're not. we're not considering. We're moving on. How about the Dallas Cowboys and Jacksonville Jaguars? We'll start off with Dak Prescott coming into week 15 after having a somewhat down game last week against those Houston Texans. Had to come back from an upset loss there for sure, but this offense has scored over 27 points now in 6 straight ball games, and Dak has had at least 250 yards passing or 2 touchdowns in all of those games. That's 15 plus fantasy points in 6 straight ball games now, and if I had to guess, things may get a little bit better, right? Because now they're going against Jacksonville. They allow the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at 19.6 per game. But the good news here, they're going to get back offensive tackle Tyron Smith. I've been talking about this for weeks. This guy is arguably one of the best offensive linemen in football, and they could get him back this week in Dallas. That is a huge lift to this offense. Plus, they just signed T.Y. Hilton also. Do I really expect T.Y. to come in and make an immediate impact? No, because they have other options in that offense already, but it's just another piece in this offense at Dak's disposal. We're going to start Dak Prescott, his opponent Trevor Lawrence, quarterbacked 8 overall on the season, playing pretty good here as of late, has had over 300 yards passing and 3+ touchdowns now in 2 of the last 3 games he's played. The run game is struggling, and it's leading to more work and more throwing for Trevor Lawrence. Over 37 pass attempts now in 3 of the last 4 games played. Going against Dallas is no easy task. They allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at 13.5 per game. Probably going to see Trevor Lawrence questionable with a toe injury for majority of the week, but this is something he's been dealing with for multiple weeks, and it hasn't affected his play, so I'm not overly worried about it. This is not an easy matchup for sure. I understand that, but at home with a healthy overall team and a potential shootout against Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, that's some pretty good upside. I'm going to start Trevor Lawrence, which will take us down now to the New York Jets and Detroit Lions. And this one is tough. You got Jared Goff, who's currently a top 12 overall quarterback in fantasy football, been cooking here as of late. 330 plus yards and 2+ touchdowns in back-to-back games for the Detroit Lions, who haven't scored less than 25 points in a game since week 9. We still haven't even really seen them unlock Jameson Williams as of late, so we know that the ceiling could go even higher. He's being brought along slowly though, which is great because they still have pieces like Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark. Big plays all over the field. But this is not an easy matchup going up against the Jets. They allow only 15.1 fantasy points per game, 8th fewest in the league to opposing quarterbacks, and haven't allowed over 200 yards passing since week 9. There's multiple offensive line injuries here for the Detroit Lions, and this is just not one of those cakewalk matchups. But most importantly, this is my WTF stat that I have just found while doing my research on Jared Goff. He's playing on the road. Now, no, it has nothing to do with, below freezing temperatures. It's this. He has thrown 22 touchdowns this season. Only 2 of them have come on the road, the other 20 at home. That is not one of those home road splits that looks very good. That worries me against a good defense. I'm going to sit Jared Goff here and play it a little safer this weekend. As for Mike White, I admire the toughness here for sure. Dude got beat up last week and just continued to come back on the field and play through it. He's already come out and said, hey, I want to play again this weekend. He doesn't want Buffalo to knock him out of the season back-to-back years. But he hasn't had a touchdown passing in the last 2 games played. And even though this is by far an easier matchup for him, Detroit allows the most points to opposing quarterbacks at 24 per game. I don't know if I want to risk it with a guy who's this beat up in New York. Literally 1 hit away. And I'm not even talking about a clean shot. This guy has multiple injuries right now. I admire the heart, but when it comes to fantasy football, it's just too risky. How about the Arizona Cardinals and Denver Broncos? Start off with no, not Kyler Murray. It's Colt McCoy. And actually, this could end up being a matchup of Colt McCoy versus Brett Rippon. Not very, awesome fantasy options in this contest. McCoy has played in 3 games this year and only has 1 touchdown to show for it. The offensive line cannot protect him going up against Denver. They allow the 3rd fewest points to opposing quarterbacks in fantasy football. We know that Kyler Murray is injured. Rondale Moore is still injured. Multiple offensive linemen are hurt. James Conner himself got banged up a little bit last week as well. There's just too many other options. I'm not risking it with Colt McCoy. For now, Russell Wilson still hasn't been ruled out, which figures, right? He finally has a good game last week and ends up leaving it with a concussion, a nasty hit, a clear concussion for Russell Wilson. And now there's actually talks out there that they could just shut him down for the season because there's really no reason to risk it anymore. There's just too many things going on around Denver that makes it unappealing for fantasy football. It's not a bad matchup. Arizona allows 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, 7th most in the league, but we got Cortland Sutton hurt. We got Kendall Hinton hurt. We got Mike Boone already out. Multiple offensive linemen. Russ coming off of a concussion. A struggling team that has nothing to play for. Why are we going to throw Russell Wilson into that situation? I don't know if they do. He could sit, and we're not going to discuss Brett Rippon at this point of the fantasy season. Now we'll move on to the New England Patriots, Las Vegas Raiders. Mac Jones. Doesn't seem to matter how banged up the running game gets in New England. They just continue to pop out solid producing running backs, which really kills the ceiling overall of Mac Jones. Typically, when a team loses their stud running backs, the quarterback has to shoulder more of the load, and it increases his ceiling. Not so much in New England. Right now, you can't figure out if Matt Patricia and Mac Jones have a good relationship, if they hate each other. They hate each other one second, they're hugging the next. You never know what's going on. The offense is very vanilla and boring. They don't put the ball down the field very often. When they do, Nelson Aguilar is probably going to drop it. I mean, we got Devontae Parker, who is now injured, a stable of young running backs that is capable of handling huge work once again. I love this matchup going up against Las Vegas. But Mac Jones has only had one game all year in which he was fantasy startable, and that's just not the type of odds I want to risk it with. Mac Jones still a sit. How about Derek Carr, arguably coming off his worst game of the year in Week 14 against the Los Angeles Rams? 11 for 20 for 137, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, was his first game since Halloween without multiple touchdowns, and it came at a very inopportune moment for fantasy players. Didn't help him at all that he had a season low in pass attempts with only 20. You have to expect there's going to be some sort of bounce back in this offense, especially if he can get a few of his weapons back. The New England Patriots allow 16.2 fantasy points per game, 21st, but New England has 3 members of its secondary that are currently questionable to play. And when I mention weapons coming back, there's a chance that we see Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow return this week. Is it 100% for sure? No. This is still an offensive line that's somewhat banged up, and we know that Josh Jacobs is dealing with a finger issue where he had to have his pinky pop back into place. Is Derek Carr a top 12 guy for me? He's going to be on the verge, but probably just on the outside looking in as of right now. Somebody I definitely would consider in 2 quarterback leagues, has an opportunity to go out there and score over 18 fantasy points this week with the injuries to the New England secondary. Just a little bit of concern being that we saw such a bad performance a week ago. Still have him in the start column here this week. How about Tennessee and the Los Angeles Chargers? We'll start off right here with Ryan Tannehill coming off a great game against the Jacksonville Jaguars where he had 254 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Should be a game here this week, though, where they have to pound Derrick Henry on the ground. Now, there's just another one of those teams that can't find any consistency in their passing game. Going up against the Chargers, they allow the 12th most points to opposing quarterbacks at 17.3 per game. We still don't know if they're going to have Treylon Burks back yet. Dontrell Hilliard is out, and we know the offensive line still missing a few key pieces as well. Ryan Tannehill, I like to compare to Andy Dalton a lot with what we talked about before. Very boom or bust, and he's busted more times than he's boomed this year. Is he a horrible option? No. There's just other better options this week. He will be somebody that's on the verge of top 12, probably in that top 15 range for me this week. His opponent, Justin Bear of the Los Angeles Chargers, quarterback 9 overall on the year. And man, it's great for this guy to have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back alongside Austin Eckler and Gerald Everett and Josh Palmer, and a heavy dose of a passing attack. 47 plus pass attempts now in 3 straight ball games, over 300 yards passing or multiple touchdowns now in 3 straight ball games, 19 plus fantasy points in 3 straight, and you know they need to keep winning ball games. Going up against Tennessee is a great matchup to do so. They allow over 22 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's second most in the NFL, and have been cooked here as of late by Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence over the last 2 weeks. I would love for them to get off offensive lineman Trey Pipkins back, who is still questionable to play, but this is another great opportunity for Justin Herbert to go out there in a good matchup, put up over 300 yards and multiple scores, a safe floor, and a high ceiling equals a start for fantasy football. How about the Cincinnati Bengals and Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Oh, what could have been for this game. We'll start it off with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, currently quarterback 4 overall on the season, but a lot of this matchup relies on the health of his weapons. If for whatever reason he's missing the likes of T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst, this ceiling is going to be a lot lower for Joe Burrow. We know they want to throw the ball a lot. We know that he is a weekly must-start quarterback. We know he still has Jamar Chase, which is a lot better than a lot of other quarterbacks have as of right now. But we could kind of see Joe Burrow in the vicinity of top 12 Joe Burrow instead of top 4 Joe Burrow for this week. Going up against Tampa Bay, they allow 16.4 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's 19th in the league. And they've had some points scored against them here as of late from the likes of Brock Purdy. Even Jacoby Brissett put up some points on this defense here recently. But it's all about the injury concerns. Hurst, Higgins, Boyd, we need these guys in the lineup. I would love to have at least one more piece back in the lineup here this week. I'm going to lower the X factor down just a little bit until we get near the end of the week to see if we get some of these guys back. It's only a positive. If we don't have any of these guys play, if for whatever reason we have no Higgins, no Boyd, no Hurst, do I still start Joe Burrow? Yes, I still start Joe Burrow. His opponent? It's Tom Brady. I don't understand the offense in Tampa Bay. The amount of weapons that they have there should be equaling a crap ton of fantasy football points, but they're just off this year. Tom Brady hasn't had 300 yards passing in a game in 5 weeks and has only done it 3 times all year. Last year, did it 9 times. They're still throwing the ball a lot because they have to. Their offensive line is so hurt they can't open up any running lanes on the ground. But now they're going against Cincinnati, who allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks at only 14.2 per game. The offensive line is the main issue here. They're getting immediate pressure on Tom Brady. He's on pace to be sacked more this year than any other year that he's played in Tampa Bay. Brady's been startable for the most part here in the second half of the season. The ceiling games that we were used to seeing, they're no longer there. Can he go out there and throw for 230 to 250, maybe a touchdown or 2 this week? Yes, entirely possible. Putting him closer to that top 12 to 15, not so much inside the top 10, that a lot of people would love to have him at this time of the year. If him and Mike Evans could just figure out what the hell's going on with this connection, all of a sudden Tom Brady becomes a lot safer, and at some point, you have to think it's going to happen. Could it be too late in the season to mean anything? Possibly. But they're too good with too great a chemistry for it just to disappear the way that it has here. Plus, Mike Evans keeps dropping deep balls, and that just irritates me to no end. But that's a different story. I'm not talking about wide receivers right now. I'm talking about Tom Brady, and as of right now, he's a fringe start for me this week. How about the New York Giants, Washington Commandos, a rematch of the game we just saw 2 weeks ago? In that game, we saw Daniel Jones have 200 yards passing and a touchdown, 12 carries for 71 and a fumble as well. Not great, not bad. Which, I guess if I think about it, is kind of how I could classify his entire season, right? It's good. It's not bad. It's not great either. Only 12 passing touchdowns to 4 interceptions, 5 rushing touchdowns. He's literally a 50-50 start. That's honestly your chances of him going out there and scoring enough points to be a solid start in fantasy football or totally tanking your team for the week. The rushing upside is sporadic. When it happens, it's great and it's almost matchup winning, but it doesn't happen every single week. Now they're going against Washington, a team that allows 17.2 fantasy points per game, 13th most in the league. It's way easier to throw on Washington than it is to run on them. They have a lot of injuries still, though. We got Daniel Bellinger, Richie James, Saquon Barkley, multiple members of the offensive line, and multiple members of the defense still questionable to play in this ball game. It's a road game. He only has 5 touchdowns total on the road this year, 12 at home. Washington, coming off of a bye week, had an extra week to prep for this game. Plus, it's the last opponent they faced. This is back-to-back matchups for Washington against the same team. It's hard to find success against a team twice in this short of a span. How about Taylor Heineke? Now, trust me, I love the Heine, okay? Full disclosure, I'm here on the internet, I'm saying it to your face, I love the Heine, but I'm not comfortable starting it in the fantasy playoffs. He played well in their last matchup, 275 and 2 touchdowns and a fumble, but that was the first fantasy startable game that guy had in over a month of football. It was the first game he's had with over 30 pass attempts since week 8. I really want to believe that he can do it again, but like I just mentioned, it's hard to beat the same team twice, even though neither team beat each other 2 weeks ago with it ending in a tie. It's just one of those situations where it's hard to find back-to-back success against the same team in the NFL more times than not. Going against the Giants, they allow 16.5 fantasy points per game. The offensive line still not 100% healthy. Both running backs, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, show on the injury report right now as questionable to play, but they should play. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. This is just kind of like a nuts on the table type of play. And if you know what that means, it's kind of like, hey, I know there's huge risk here, but he's potentially a decent start. The reason why I don't have him listed as a start is he doesn't have a high enough ceiling to win me a matchup. This isn't a guy that is capable of going out there and throwing for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, like ever. Is there a chance that it could happen? For sure, but we don't see it consistently enough to want to throw him into our lineup, so he's still a sit. And then Monday Night Football, our 4th night of football here this week, the Los Angeles Rams, Green Bay Packers, and Baker Mayfield. Are we going to get a replay of the bake show, or is it going to be a bake sale here this week for the Los Angeles Rams? Honestly, I really want to see Baker Mayfield go off in primetime football again. The NFL is a better place when Baker Mayfield is good, whether you like him or you hate him. He's now had a full week in this offense, has to be in a better place with this playbook now than he was last week. But he's going on the road to Green Bay to play in the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, which does not sound ideal. Green Bay, easier to run on. They're allowing 16 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, which is 22nd. Nothing really new here for injuries. We know the offensive line still missing multiple pieces. We know we don't have Kupp or Allen Robinson here as well. But who are we kidding? No one out there, I believe, is contemplating starting Baker Mayfield. I think we all want to kick back on Monday Night Football, cold drink in hand, feet up on the couch, and just watch the bake show happen rather than have to trust it and depend on it to win a fantasy football matchup. And then lastly, Aaron Rodgers in a must-win situation for the Green Bay Packers coming off the bye week. Had an extra week to not only prep for this game, but also get healthier as well. Aaron Rodgers was banged up. Aaron Jones was banged up. They should be in a better spot than they were 2 weeks ago. Rodgers has had at least 2 passing touchdowns now in 3 of his last 4 games played, including in 2 tough matchups against the Philadelphia Eagles and Dallas Cowboys. Really hoping that Baker Mayfield can go out there and put some points on the board, because if that's the case, Aaron Rodgers is going to continue to throw. If they don't, if Green Bay gets a lead here, and it's going to be one of these cold weather games in Lambeau, we can see a whole lot of the running backs late in this game to keep the clock moving. The Rams, they allow only 15.4 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Could get Romeo Doubs back this week for the Green Bay Packers, but you got Aaron Rodgers coming off a bye week at home in a cold weather game on primetime football, in which he had an extra week to prep for this matchup, and he has some weapons getting healthier. Okay, I'm game. I'll start Aaron Rodgers here in week 15. But there you have it, my starts and sits for the quarterback position, week 15 fantasy football. Hopefully I was able to make it a little bit easier when it comes to making decisions for your team this week. But don't forget, our rankings come out on Thursday. Maybe you're looking between a couple guys and you don't know which way to go. Don't worry, the rankings will be out before Thursday, so you can make the best decisions possible for your fantasy team. Looking forward to bringing home a lot of championship trophies and belts and rings and every other thing here this year for Headliner Nation. Do me a favor though, hit that like button down below if you haven't already. Consider subscribing, even if you just found us. Even though the season is almost over, we don't stop. We go year-round, talking football, having a good time with you, the community, 12 months of the year. But for now, I'm going to get out of here for the day. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day, a great week, and we'll talk to you later.